Okay, so here's another concept that's related to stoichiometry and a couple of things that helps you understand, I think, a little bit more about stoichiometry. Number one, you need to remember that for stoichiometry, what we're doing when we're calculating the numbers is we're calculating either how much reacted or how much was produced. Sometimes you're going to see questions where it might say how much is left over or things like that, and so there's a little bit of extra things that extra calculations you're going to need to do, where if you're calculating some stuff in stoichiometry, that's how much was produced or reacted, and so then you might have to subtract and stuff like that. In this type of question for percent yield, what we're looking at is okay, this is how much was supposed to react, or this is how much was supposed to be made, but this is how much I actually collected. And so if we were in the lab, what we would do is we would do a lab where we would mix two solutions together and then filter out a precipitate. And so let's say we were doing this chemical reaction here where we've got strontium nitrate and copper 2 sulfate, the same reaction we used in the previous example when we talked about limiting reagents. And it makes this precipitate right here, strontium sulfate. Now, if I had 125 grams of strontium nitrate reacting with excess copper 2 sulfate, I know from my stoichiometry here that should produce 108 grams. The question tells me that when I did the lab, and I was actually in the lab doing the reaction, and I physically collected the precipitate, I only collected 97.2 grams. And so what we can do, and what we often do in chemistry, is when we perform experiments like this, we have to calculate basically how accurate were we, how good were we at our collection. And so to do that, we use this formula called percent yield. So in other words, this is how much I could get, and I wouldn't ever get more than that. And this is how much I actually collected, so 97.2 grams of strontium sulfate in this case. And so from that, I just take those two numbers and I calculate a percentage out of that. So 97.2 grams divided by 108 gives me 90.0% as my answer. And so kind of the standard in chemistry is that if you have a percent yield of 90% or higher, then you've done a pretty good job. Anything lower than 90% is, maybe had too much human error in your experiment and you need to maybe repeat and do it again, just to make sure that you're taking care of some of the minor details that need to be cared for when you're doing chemical experiments in the lab. But that's it essentially for percent yield. One last thing that you might see is you might see a question where they give you a percentage and they ask you, okay, what's the actual amount that was collected? Remember, to get the predicted amount down here on the bottom, this comes from stoichiometry. So you'll have to do the stoichiometry to get that number, to plug it in and then solve for x, which would be your actual for that. So you can see questions kind of reverse that a little bit, but that's it for percent yield. Thanks guys for watching. Good luck.